Okay, so let's get started on the title. Okay, the very first thing we want to do is highlight the column in question. And then we'll go over to Data. And in the Data pane, if we go all the way over, we can see Text to Columns. Go ahead and click on that. And it gives us two options, delimited and fixed. What we want is delimited. The colon is a somewhat unusual delimiter. So what we'll have to do is click on Other and then enter in this little box the semicolon. And once we do that, we'll get a preview of what it looks like down below. The next thing Excel wants to know is where do we want this data? And I made a mental note that column H is the next available column. So in this little destination pane, between the dollar signs, we're going to put the letter H. It does not have to be capitalized, but I like to capitalize it. And click Finish. Now if we look in column H, we have EMS, the title, and the call type. I'm going to write call type. And the next thing that I'm going to do is delete this column D, because number one, we don't need it anymore. And number two, the more columns and the more rows that we have, the slower this thing is going to be. And right now, this is somewhere in the order of 500,000 rows of data. So it's quite a lot. Now, note that the next column is J. So let's go ahead and split the description column, column B, in the same way, except we'll be using the semicolon instead of the colon. Text to columns, splitting on the delimiter. Next, we'll select our delimiter. A semicolon is an option for us. And now where do we want to put it? Column J is the next available, and this will populate J and then everything after until it is complete. Just click Finish. And here we are. All right, and there we go. We have J, K, L, and M all filled up with different data points. Let's stretch these out and see what we have. Notice I selected them all and then stretched one of them, and they will stretch equivalent to one another. Not quite enough. I'll stretch just a little bit more on this guy. There we go. Aha! You see, now we have a little bit of a problem. Our timestamp is in the correct format. That's good, but we're missing some timestamps. It looks like some of the timestamps have dropped into the station column. And if we look at the timestamps that exist in the station column, some of them have stations and some of them don't. So we are going to have to reconcile that. What else do we have here? We have township, which is now a duplicate, and then we have this cross streets. So let's go ahead and delete anything that is now duplicate. So we will delete the address, we will delete township, we'll go ahead and delete timestamp and delete description. And once you have those deleted, go ahead and rename everything appropriately. And I'm going to abbreviate timestamp with just simply TS. By splitting this data out into individual columns, everything now is nice and neat and tucked away in its own unique column, and we can access them individually for things like pivot tables and charts. But we've created a bit of a problem, and we've discovered our first insight. We've noticed that the dates exist, the timestamps for all of these rows exist, but they're offset. So the question is, why? Well, we split on the delimiter of the semicolon delimiter, and each thing that occurs prior to the semicolon gets its own column. Because they're offset by one, that means some of these fields are missing stations. So that means that when the dispatchers were entering the information, for whatever reason, the station identifier was not being added to the description. So we don't know which station went to these particular calls. So that's our very first insight, is that we can get on the horn with the dispatch and with IT and try to figure out what's going on here, because we have incomplete data for the stations that are responding to different calls. So reconciling the timestamps and the station IDs will require some functions. They're going to get a little bit complex, but that's okay. I'll walk you through every step of the way. But just to get our toes wet, let's use the very first function, a very simple function, trim. If you look at the township column, the township column has automatically populated with a space in front of some, but not all, of the townships. So let's trim out that space, that invisible character, and get everything all neat and tidy and lined up together.